I could feel their eyes on me, burning into my back like hot coals as I slipped through the shadows of the great hall. The autumn equinox celebration roared around me, laughter, shouts, the clink of glasses, and beneath it all, the steady drum of power. Power I didn't possess, power that made me shrink into corners, hoping to become invisible. The scent of roasted meat, wine, and wood smoke filled the air, but beneath it lurked something wilder, the musk of wolves barely contained within human skin. I wrapped my arms around my middle, my thin dress doing little to ward off the evening chill that seeped through the ancient stone walls. The pack's ancestral home had stood for centuries, but tonight, it felt especially imposing, as if the very building recognized I didn't belong. "Watch where you're going, Omega," a voice snarled as a shoulder knocked into mine, sending me stumbling against the wall. I steadied myself, keeping my gaze lowered. Looking directly at higher-ranked wolves was considered a challenge, and challenges were met with teeth and claws. "Sorry," I whispered, though the wolf who'd bumped me had already disappeared into the crowd. My stomach growled painfully, reminding me why I'd risked coming to the celebration at all. I hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days. As the lowest-ranking wolf in the Northern Territories pack, I was always last to feed, if there was anything left at all. Tonight's feast had drawn wolves from 3 neighboring territories, all allies of our Alpha King, all here to discuss the growing threat from the southern packs. With so many powerful wolves gathered, I'd hoped to go unnoticed. I touched the silver pendant hanging at my throat, my mother's final gift before she died. The crescent moon design caught the light from the massive chandeliers overhead. "Strength comes from surviving storms," she'd whispered as she pressed it into my palm. "Remember who you are when the world tries to break you." The pendant was my talisman, my only inheritance, the only thing that made me feel like something more than nothing. The tables at the far end of the hall were still laden with food, though the formal dinner had ended an hour ago. The higher-ranking pack members had moved on to drinking and politicking, leaving the remains of the feast unattended. My mouth watered at the sight. If I could just get a plate without being noticed. I slipped along the perimeter of the room, keeping to the shadows cast by the massive stone pillars. No one paid me any mind. I was furniture to them, less interesting than the ancient tapestries adorning the walls. Years of practice had taught me how to move silently, how to fold my body into small spaces, how to become effectively invisible. In a hierarchy built on strength and dominance, being overlooked was sometimes the only safety an Omega could find. I reached the end of the banquet table where platters of half-eaten food remained. Quickly, I grabbed a tarnished silver plate, one with a small dent in the rim that the others would disdain, and began gathering scraps. A half-eaten roll, some vegetable ends, a few slivers of meat that had dried at the edges. Not the choicest portions, but to my empty stomach, it looked like a feast fit for royalty. Finding a secluded alcove behind one of the heavy curtains that framed the tall windows, I slid to the floor and prepared to eat my stolen meal. The alcove was small but deep, hidden from casual glances by the thick velvet drapes. I'd discovered it years ago, during my first winter solstice celebration, when the overwhelming scents and sounds had driven me to seek solitude. The first bite of food was heaven. I closed my eyes, savoring the flavors exploding across my tongue. I ate slowly, methodically, making each morsel last. Who knew when I would eat again? The meat, though cold, was rich and gamey. Venison, I thought, from the Alpha's private hunting grounds. I was so focused on my meal that I didn't notice the change in the air, until it was too late. A sudden hush fell over the nearby revelry, like a wave of silence spreading outward. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and my wolf stirred restlessly beneath my skin. Something was wrong. Something had changed. Then I caught it. A scent so potent it made my hands tremble. Pine and snow and something earthy, like the forest floor after rain. Beneath it ran a current of raw, untamed power that made my wolf whine in recognition. The Alpha King. I froze, a piece of bread halfway to my mouth, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. He couldn't possibly be looking for me. I was nobody. Nothing, a shadow at the edges of pack life. Yet the silence continued to spread, and with it came the unmistakable sensation of being hunted. the heavy curtain was ripped aside, flooding my hiding place with golden light. I blinked up, momentarily blinded, my plate of scraps suddenly feeling like damning evidence in my hands. And there he stood, Alexander Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, sovereign over 5 allied packs, the most feared and respected wolf in 1,000 miles. His broad shoulders blocked the light, casting his face in shadow, but I didn't need to see his expression to feel the wave of dominance rolling off him. It pressed down on me like a physical weight, making it difficult to breathe. "What?" he said, his voice dangerously soft. "Do we have here?" I couldn't speak, couldn't move. My wolf was cowering inside me, belly up in submission before this apex predator. In the 5 years since he'd taken the throne after his father's assassination, I'd glimpsed the Alpha King only from a distance. Up close, he was terrifying in his beauty, all sharp angles and controlled power, like a blade waiting to cut. His eyes caught the light as he stepped forward, and I saw they were amber, not the warm gold of autumn leaves, but the cold, metallic shine of a predator's gaze in the dark. They fixed on the plate in my hands, then traveled slowly up to my face. "Stand," he commanded, and my body obeyed, before my mind could process the word, the plate clattering to the stone floor. I stood trembling before him, head bowed, eyes fixed on the intricate pattern of the carpet beneath my feet. My pale blonde hair slipped forward, providing a curtain between us. I was acutely aware of my shabby dress, the worn fabric marking me as clearly as a brand. "Look at me." His voice had dropped an octave, resonating with alpha command. Fighting every instinct to remain submissive, I slowly raised my eyes to his. The contact was electric, sending a shock through my system that made my wolf surge forward, pressing against the boundaries of my skin as if trying to get closer to him. I immediately dropped my gaze again, terrified by my reaction. "What's your name?" he asked, taking another step into my alcove. The space suddenly felt tiny, his presence filling it completely. "Eleanor," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Eleanor Gray." "Eleanor," he repeated, and something in the way he said my name made me shiver. "Why are you hiding back here, eating scraps like a stray?" The question hung in the air between us. I didn't know how to answer without sounding pathetic or accusatory. The truth was simple. I ate scraps because that's all that was ever left for me. I hid because existing in the open invited abuse from those who enjoyed reminding me of my place. "I was hungry, Your Majesty," I finally said, deciding simple honesty was safest. I didn't want to disturb anyone. A low sound rumbled from his chest. Not quite a growl, but something equally primal. I flinched, certain I'd somehow offended him, but when I dared another glance up, his expression had changed. The cold assessment was gone, replaced by something more complex. Curiosity, perhaps, or anger on a slow burn. "How long have you been in my pack, Eleanor Gray?" he asked, his voice deceptively casual. "All my life, Your Majesty, 23 years. And yet I don't know your face." It wasn't a question, but an accusation, directed at himself or at me. I couldn't tell. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted in the main hall. Voices raised in alarm, the scent of fear suddenly sharp in the air. The Alpha King's head snapped toward the sound, his body instantly alert. "Sire," a voice called urgently. "The Southern delegation has arrived early. They're at the gates, demanding an audience." The Southern packs, our enemies for generations, responsible for the death of the previous Alpha King. Their arrival now, unannounced, and during a sacred celebration, could only mean trouble. The Alpha King's eyes returned to me, narrowed in calculation. For a heartbeat, I thought he might simply leave me there, return to his duties and forget our strange encounter. I almost hoped he would, but then his hand shot out, fingers wrapping around my wrist in an iron grip. "Come," he commanded, pulling me from my hiding place. "Your Majesty, I shouldn't be seen," I protested weakly, even as I stumbled after him. "I'm just an Omega. This is pack business." He stopped so abruptly I nearly crashed into his back. When he turned to face me, there was something dangerous in his eyes, something that made my breath catch. "You are pack," he said, each word precise and weighted with authority. "And tonight, Eleanor Gray, you are mine. I didn't understand what he meant, but I had no chance to question him. He was already moving again, pulling me through the crowd that parted before him like water around a stone. Wolves bowed their heads as he passed, then raised curious, sometimes hostile eyes to me. I could feel their confusion, their judgment. What was their alpha doing with a nobody Omega? The pendant at my throat seemed suddenly heavy, my mother's words echoing in my mind. Remember who you are when the world tries to break you. But who was I? Just an Omega, the lowest of the low, being dragged into pack politics that had nothing to do with me. Yet something in the Alpha's words, in the possessive grip around my wrist, made me wonder if everything was about to change. As we approached the massive entry doors, he released my wrist but stepped closer, his mouth near my ear. "Stay behind me," he murmured, his breath warm against my skin. "Say nothing. Watch everything." Then the doors swung open, revealing a delegation of wolves I'd never seen before. They stood in aggressive stances, their scents acrid with hostility, and something else, a sickness that made my nose wrinkle in distaste. At their center stood a man nearly as tall as Alexander, with pale eyes and a cruel set to his mouth. "Alpha King Blackthorn," the man said, his voice oily with false deference. "How kind of you to welcome us to your celebration." Alexander's posture shifted subtly, angling his body to keep me partially shielded behind him. "Victor," he replied coolly. The invitation stated clearly that the Southern delegation was expected tomorrow. Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Did it? How careless of us to misread. But since we're here, perhaps we could discuss the matter of the disputed territories. Privately." Alexander's response was cut short by a commotion outside. Shouts, and the sound of fighting. One of our guards burst through the doors, bleeding from a gash across his face. "Sire! They brought an army! They've breached the western gate!" The trap had been sprung. As chaos erupted around us, I felt Alexander's body tense, ready for battle. But in the split second before he lunged forward, he turned to me, his amber eyes burning with a fierce intensity. "Run," he ordered, "to my quarters. 3rd floor, north wing. Lock yourself in and touch nothing." Then he was gone, shifting in mid-stride, his massive wolf form cutting through the crowd toward the threat. I stood frozen, watching as the Alpha King, my Alpha King, raced toward danger, leaving me with an order I didn't understand, and a future suddenly as uncertain as the outcome of the battle beginning to rage around me. I ran. Through corridors I'd only glimpsed from afar, past startled servants and warriors rushing to join the fray. I fled as commanded. My heart thundered in my chest, fear and confusion tangling with something else. A strange, pulling sensation that seemed to tug me in the direction of the Alpha King's quarters. Behind me, snarls and howls erupted as wolves shifted, the celebration transforming into battlefield in mere seconds. The smell of blood tinged the air, metallic and sharp. I forced myself not to look back, not to think about what was happening to my packmates, to Alexander. The north wing of the ancestral home was foreign territory to me. Omegas were housed in the southern annexes, small rooms stacked like crates, far from the luxury of the main building. The stone grew finer as I ascended the spiral staircase, the worn steps of the servants' passage giving way to polished marble. Tapestries depicting the history of our pack lined the walls. The Great Migration, the First Alliance, battles won and lost over centuries. 3rd floor. I emerged into a corridor lit by ornate sconces, their golden light spilling across a midnight blue carpet runner embroidered with silver moons. The air here was different, cleaner, carrying a concentrated version of that same scent I'd detected earlier. Pine, snow, raw power. Alexander's scent, marking his territory as surely as any physical boundary. I approached the massive double doors at the end of the hallway, knowing instinctively they led to his private quarters. My hand trembled as I reached for the handle. What was I doing here? Why had he sent me, of all people, to this most private sanctuary? The door swung open soundlessly, revealing a suite that took my breath away. Vaulted ceilings, walls lined with books, furniture crafted from dark wood and upholstered in deep blues and silvers. A fire crackled in a stone hearth large enough to stand in, casting warm light across the room. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the mountains beyond the packlands, their peaks silver in the moonlight. I stepped inside, closing and locking the door behind me as instructed. The fighting would not reach here, not yet, at least. This high in the ancient fortress, with only one entrance, the Alpha's quarters were as defensible as they were beautiful. My reflection caught my eye. A full-length mirror near what I assumed was the entrance to the bedchamber showed a frightened girl with wide eyes and tangled pale blonde hair, her simple dress smudged with dirt from her hiding place. I looked exactly what I was. An Omega who'd stumbled into a place she didn't belong. But why had he sent me here? The question circled my mind as I paced the room, afraid to touch anything despite being alone. Protection, perhaps, securing a vulnerable pack member during an attack. But there were dozens of Omegas in the pack, many at the celebration. Why me? What had been in his eyes when he'd found me eating scraps in the alcove? Something on his desk caught my attention. A map, spread open and held down with paperweights at each corner. I approached cautiously, my curiosity overcoming my hesitation. It was our territory, the northern lands, but marked with notations I didn't understand. Circled areas, crossed-out sections, arrows indicating movement patterns, battle plans, or something else. The sound of fighting had faded, distance and thick stone walls muffling even the most ferocious howls. I moved to the window, pressing my hand against the cool glass as I peered down at the courtyard below. Shadows moved in the torchlight, wolves in battle, some in human form with weapons, others as massive beasts with gleaming fangs. I couldn't make out which side was winning. A sharp pain lanced through my chest, making me gasp and double over. It felt like my ribs were cracking, my lungs struggling for air. My wolf stirred violently beneath my skin, clawing to get out, responding to something I couldn't identify. The pain faded as quickly as it had come, leaving me gasping, clutching the windowsill for support. What was happening to me? I turned back to the room, suddenly feeling like an intruder. I shouldn't be here. Shouldn't be seeing these private aspects of the Alpha King's life. The desk with its mysterious maps, the bookshelves lined with ancient texts and modern novels alike. The small personal touches that reminded me he was more than just our fearsome ruler. The worn leather armchair pulled close to the fire, a book splayed open on its arm. A half-empty glass of amber liquid on the side table. Hours passed. I alternated between pacing, watching the battle below, and perching anxiously on the very edge of a chair, afraid to make myself too comfortable in this forbidden space. The fighting seemed to be moving away from the main keep, toward the eastern forests. A good sign, I hoped. When the door finally opened, I leapt to my feet, my heart in my throat. Alexander stood in the doorway, his massive frame filling the space. He'd shifted back to human form, but the evidence of battle marked him clearly. A diagonal slash across his chest still seeped blood, though the wound was already closing thanks to his accelerated healing. His black hair was disheveled, his breathing heavy. He'd found clothes, black pants and a partially buttoned shirt, but his feet were bare on the stone floor. Our eyes met, and that same electric shock I'd felt in the alcove raced through me again, stronger this time. My wolf surged in response, making me sway on my feet. "You're here," he said, his voice rough with exertion. He sounded almost surprised, as if he'd expected me to disobey his command. "You ordered me to come," I replied softly, unsure what else to say. He closed the door behind him, locking it with a decisive click. I watched as he crossed to a cabinet, poured water from a crystal decanter, and drank deeply. His movements were controlled but edged with a tension I could feel from across the room. The Southern delegation, I dared to ask when the silence stretched too long. "Repelled?" he said shortly. For now, it was an assassination attempt disguised as a diplomatic incident. Had they succeeded, the resulting power vacuum would have thrown the northern packs into chaos, made us easy targets for full invasion. I nodded, processing the implications. The Southerners had planned to kill him. Our Alpha, our king. A cold fury rose in me at the thought, surprising in its intensity. "You're bleeding," I said, nodding toward his chest. His hand rose to the wound, coming away smeared with red. It's nothing. Already healing. I knew I should avert my eyes from his bare skin, but I couldn't seem to look away. The firelight cast shadows across the defined muscles of his torso, highlighting scars from battles past. He was beautiful in the way predators are beautiful. Dangerous, lethal, perfectly designed for power. "Why did you send me here?" I asked finally, the question that had been burning in me since I'd arrived. Alexander walked toward me slowly, his amber eyes never leaving mine. I should have backed away, maintained the respectful distance required between an Omega and the Alpha King. Instead, I stood my ground, some instinct I didn't recognize keeping my feet planted firmly on the carpet. "You don't know what you are, do you?" he asked, his voice low and intent. Confusion furrowed my brow. "I'm an Omega," I said. "The lowest rank. I know my place in the pack." Something flashed in his eyes, anger, but not directed at me. "Who told you that?" "Everyone. The hierarchy is clear. Alphas at the top, then betas, deltas." I trailed off. "Omegas at the bottom. That's how it's always been. That's how it's been since my father's time," he corrected, stopping just a foot away from me. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell his scent intensified by battle adrenaline, a corruption of our true nature, a perversion of the old ways. I didn't understand what he was saying. The hierarchy had been established for generations. It was as immutable as the mountains surrounding our territory. "In the ancient times," he continued, "before my father's reign, before his father's, Omegas were rare, precious. They were not the lowest rank, but something else entirely, something vital." My fingers found my mother's pendant, clutching it like a lifeline. "I don't understand." "No, you wouldn't." The knowledge was suppressed. The old books burned. His jaw tightened. My father made sure of that when he killed the last true Omega and took the throne by force. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "The last, until you," Alexander said, his gaze intensifying. "I knew the moment I caught your scent. Subtle, hidden under years of being told you were nothing, but unmistakable to one who knows what to look for. You're not just an Omega, Eleanor Gray. You're a true Omega, the firstborn in 30 years. My head spun with implications I couldn't fully grasp. "What does that mean?" Instead of answering directly, he asked, "Did you feel it? During the battle? A pain in your chest like your ribs were breaking?" I gasped. "How did you know?" "Because I felt it too. The beginning of the bond." His hand rose, not quite touching me, hovering near my face. A true Alpha and a true Omega create a balance. Two halves of a whole. It's why the southern wolves want me dead. They know what would happen if I found what my father tried to eradicate, which is what? Stability, strength, a united North under leadership that rules through more than just terror and dominance. "I still don't understand," I whispered, though something deep within me, my wolf, seemed to recognize the truth in his words. She was more alert now, pressing close to the surface of my skin, more present than she'd ever been before. "If what you're saying is true, why has no one ever told me? Why treat me as lesser all these years?" Alexander's expression darkened. "Because they didn't know. My father's purge was thorough. He killed the true Omegas and spread lies about what Omega truly meant, redefining it as the lowest rank. After his death, I began searching the old archives, piecing together what was lost." His eyes softened slightly. "But I never expected to find one of you right under my nose, hiding in an alcove eating scraps." The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy cloak. If what he said was true, my entire life had been built on a lie, a deliberate distortion of my true nature. But how could I believe this sudden revelation from a man I barely knew, even if he was my Alpha? "Why should I trust you?" I asked, surprising myself with my boldness. "You didn't even know I existed until tonight, despite being my Alpha for 5 years." A flash of guilt crossed his features. "A failure I intend to rectify." He moved to the bookshelves, pulling out an ancient tome bound in faded leather. This is one of the few texts that survived my father's purge. It was hidden by loyalists to the old ways. He opened it carefully, the pages crackling with age, and brought it to me. The text was in an older form of our language, difficult to decipher, but the illustrations were clear enough. Diagrams of the pack structure, not as a pyramid with alphas at the top, but as a circle. At opposite points on the circle stood two figures, one massive and radiating power, labeled in the old tongue as true alpha, and opposite, a smaller figure surrounded by what looked like light, labeled true omega. The alpha is strength, protection, decision, Alexander explained, his finger tracing the illustrations. The omega is healing, intuition, connection. One without the other creates imbalance. Together they form the axis around which the pack revolves in harmony. I studied the ancient pages, something resonating within me. If this is true, why would your father destroy this knowledge? Why kill the true omegas? Power, Alexander said simply. A true alpha bonded with a true omega cannot be corrupted by power lust or tyranny. The bond creates balance, prevents the alpha from becoming a despot. My father wanted absolute control, untempered by compassion or constraint. His voice hardened. He was a monster wearing the crown of alpha. When I was 15, I watched him execute the last known true omega, an older woman who had been hiding her nature. He made the entire pack watch. Horror filled me at the image his words conjured. And now the southern packs want to kill you because they operate the same way my father did. Through fear and brutality. They've heard rumors that I've been researching the old ways, seeking to restore balance. They fear what will happen if the northern packs unite under balanced leadership. He closed the book carefully. They're right to be afraid. A knock at the door interrupted us. Alexander tensed, positioning himself between me and the potential threat. "Sire?" "It's Damon." A male voice, steady and calm, came through the heavy wood. Alexander relaxed marginally, but didn't move from his protective stance. "Enter." The door opened to reveal a tall man with auburn hair, his left arm wrapped in a makeshift bandage. He bowed slightly, then his eyes widened as he noticed me standing behind Alexander. "Report," Alexander commanded, drawing the newcomer's attention back to him. "The southern forces have retreated beyond our borders. We lost 6 warriors and 12 more are wounded. Their losses were heavier, at least 15 dead. Victor escaped, but 2 of his lieutenants fell." Damon's eyes flickered to me again, curiosity evident. "We've doubled the border patrols and secured the fortress. The celebration guests have been escorted to safe quarters. And the southern delegation that came to the gates? All dead, except Victor and his personal guard. We're interrogating 2 captives now." Alexander nodded. "Good. Post additional guards in this wing, but discreetly. No one enters without my direct permission." "Yes, sire." Damon hesitated. "The council is demanding an emergency meeting. They're concerned about reports that an Omega was seen being escorted to your quarters during the attack." So word had already spread. I felt heat rise to my cheeks, imagining the rumors flying through the pack. "The council can wait until morning," Alexander said firmly. "I have more important matters to attend to." Damon nodded, though concern remained in his eyes. "As you wish, sire." With a final curious glance at me, he withdrew, closing the door behind him. "Who was that?" I asked when we were alone again. "Damon Whitelaw, my beta, chief of security, and oldest friend." Alexander moved to the fire, stoking it with an iron poker. "He's loyal, but even he doesn't fully understand what's happening. No one does, except perhaps the oldest wolves who remember whispers of the old ways." The adrenaline of the night was beginning to fade, leaving exhaustion in its wake. I sank onto the edge of a chair, trying to process everything I'd learned. "So what happens now? What does this mean for me? For us?" Alexander turned from the fire, the flames casting his features in sharp relief. "That depends on you, Eleanor." "On me?" "The bond between a true alpha and true omega cannot be forced. It must be accepted willingly by both sides." He knelt before me, bringing our faces level, his amber eyes searching mine. "I cannot and will not coerce you, but I need you to understand what's at stake. Our pack, all 5 northern packs, stand at a crossroads. War with the South is coming, whether we wish it or not. United under balanced leadership, we might survive, Divided, ruled by fear and old prejudices, we will fall. The weight of his words pressed down on me. Yesterday I had been nothing, a shadow at the edge of pack life. Today, according to Alexander, I held the future of the northern packs in my hands. It was too much, too fast. I need time, I said softly. This is overwhelming. He nodded, standing once more. Of course, but time is a luxury we may not have much of. The attack tonight was just the beginning. He moved to a door I hadn't noticed before, opening it to reveal a smaller adjoining chamber. You can rest here. It's secure, and you'll be safe. I rose on unsteady feet, moving toward the room. It was simple compared to his quarters, but still luxurious by my standards. A bed with fine linens, a small fireplace already lit, a washstand with a porcelain bowl and pitcher. Thank you, I said, pausing at the threshold, for telling me the truth, for seeing me when no one else did. Something flickered in his eyes, an emotion I couldn't name. Get some rest, Eleanor. Tomorrow will come all too soon, and with it, decisions that cannot be unmade. I nodded, retreating into the room and closing the door softly behind me. Alone at last, I sank onto the bed, my mind whirling with revelations. True Omega, ancient knowledge, a bond that could save or doom us all. It was like something from the old legends told around pack bonfires, not the reality of my quiet, unremarkable life. I touched my mother's pendant, wondering if she had known. Had she been hiding me, protecting me all along? Strength comes from surviving storms, she'd said. Perhaps this was the storm she'd been preparing me for. Sleep claimed me eventually, pulling me into dreams filled with amber eyes, ancient books, and wolves running through moonlit forests. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through a small window I hadn't noticed the night before. For a moment, I was disoriented, the luxurious surroundings unfamiliar. Then memory rushed back. The attack, Alexander's revelations, the weight of a future suddenly uncertain. A soft knock came at the door connecting to the main chamber. Yes? I called, smoothing my rumpled dress as best I could. The door opened to reveal not Alexander, but a young woman carrying a tray of food and a bundle of clothing. Her eyes widened when she saw me, recognition and confusion chasing across her features. Eleanor? She gasped. What are you? She stopped herself, composure returning as she dipped into a small curtsy. The Alpha King asked me to bring you breakfast and fresh clothes. He said you're to join him when you're ready. I recognized her now. Maria, a beta who worked in the kitchens. We'd spoken occasionally when I'd slipped in looking for leftover food. She'd always been kind, slipping me extra portions when she could. Thank you, Maria, I said, taking the tray as she laid the bundle of clothing on the bed. She hesitated, clearly burning with questions she dared not ask. The whole pack is talking about you, she finally said in a hushed voice. They say the Alpha King claimed you during the battle, that he killed 3 southern wolves who tried to reach you. My cheeks burned. It's complicated. Maria nodded, though her expression suggested she believed the rumors. If you need anything else, just ask. I've been assigned to attend you personally. Another small curtsy, and she was gone, closing the door behind her. I set the tray down. Fresh bread, fruit, smoked meat, and a pot of tea. More food than I'd typically see in days. The clothing was even more surprising. A dress of fine blue wool, simple but well made, with soft leather boots and undergarments of a quality I'd never worn. As I ate and dressed, I tried to prepare myself for what was to come. The pack was talking. The council wanted answers. The southern wolves would return, better prepared next time. And Alexander wanted, what? A partnership? A political alliance? Or something deeper, more primal? The bond he'd described between true Alpha and true Omega. And what did I want? The question echoed in my mind as I fastened my mother's pendant around my neck, its familiar weight offering small comfort. 24 hours ago, my greatest aspiration had been to find enough food to quiet my hunger. Now I was being offered a place at the center of pack life, a position of influence I'd never imagined. When I emerged from the small chamber, Alexander was standing at the window, hands clasped behind his back as he gazed out at his territory. He'd changed into formal attire, black pants, a charcoal shirt, and a leather jacket with silver embroidery marking his status. He turned as I entered, his eyes widening slightly at my transformation. "The clothes fit well," he observed, his gaze traveling over me in a way that made my skin warm. I smoothed the blue fabric self-consciously. "Yes, thank you, they're lovely. Blue suits you," he said, then seemed to catch himself, his expression becoming more businesslike. "The council is assembled. They're waiting for us." Fear flickered through me. The council? What am I supposed to say to them? Nothing. For now, let me handle the politics. You're there to observe, to begin understanding the challenges we face. He moved toward me, stopping close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Are you afraid?" I considered lying, then decided honesty was better, terrified. A small smile touched his lips. "Good. Fear keeps us alert. It's the absence of fear that makes wolves dangerous. They believe themselves invincible." His expression sobered. "But remember this. Regardless of what anyone says in that chamber, you belong at my side, by ancient right and by my choice. Can you hold on to that truth even when others try to make you doubt?" I touched my pendant, drawing strength from its familiar contours. "I'll try. That's all I ask." He offered his arm, a formal gesture I'd seen between high-ranking pairs, but had never experienced myself. "Shall we?" Taking his arm felt like crossing a threshold into a new life. His muscles were firm beneath my fingers, his presence solid and reassuring beside me. We left his quarters together, 2 guards falling into step behind us as we navigated the corridors of the ancestral home. Wolves stopped to stare as we passed, their expressions ranging from shock to curiosity to outright hostility. I kept my chin up, though every instinct screamed at me to lower my eyes, to make myself small and unnoticeable as I'd done all my life. Alexander seemed oblivious to the attention, or perhaps simply accustomed to it, his stride confident and measured. We descended to the 2nd floor, where the formal meeting chambers were located. 2 more guards stood outside massive oak doors carved with the pack's emblem, a wolf howling beneath a crescent moon. They bowed as we approached, swinging the doors open to reveal the council chamber beyond. 12 wolves sat around a large circular table, their conversations cutting off abruptly as we entered. These were the highest-ranking members of the Northern Territory, pack leaders, military commanders, keepers of lore and law. Their combined power was palpable in the air, though none approached Alexander's raw dominance. "My king," said an older woman, rising from her seat. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe braid, her eyes sharp as she took in my presence at Alexander's side. "We've been waiting." "Elder Lydia," Alexander acknowledged with a nod. "The aftermath of an assassination attempt takes precedence over council formalities." "Of course," she conceded, though her gaze remained fixed on me. "And this is—" "Eleanor Gray," Alexander said, his voice taking on a formal cadence. "Born of the Northern Territory Principal Pack, daughter of Helena Gray, deceased." Recognition flickered in Elder Lydia's eyes at my mother's name, though she masked it quickly. "And her presence here?" Alexander guided me to a seat at his right hand, a position of honor that caused several council members to exchange glances. "That is part of what we must discuss today." For the next hour, I listened as they reviewed the previous night's attack, casualties, damages, security breaches. The Southern Wolves had come prepared, with inside knowledge of our defenses. Someone had betrayed us, though no suspect had yet been identified. Throughout the discussion, I felt the council members' eyes returning to me, measuring, assessing, wondering. Finally, when the immediate crisis had been addressed, Elder Lydia turned the conversation to what was clearly their primary concern. "Sire," she said carefully, "there are rumors circulating about your personal interest in this young woman. Given the precarious political situation, the council feels it would be prudent to address these matters directly." Alexander leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed, but his eyes alert. "By all means, address them," another council member, a battle-scarred man with a gruff voice, spoke up. "Bluntly, sire, taking an Omega to your bed in times of war sends a message of weakness to our enemies." If you need companionship, there are dozens of suitable alphas or high-ranking betas who would strengthen alliances and demonstrate proper hierarchy. My cheeks burned with humiliation at being discussed so crudely. Alexander's hand tightened on the arm of his chair, the only outward sign of his anger. "Is that the council's position?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft, "that I should select a partner based on political expediency and outdated notions of hierarchy?" "It is the traditional way," Elder Lydia intervened, her tone placating. My father was a tyrant who led us to the brink of war through his cruelty and short-sightedness." Alexander cut in sharply. "I did not take his crown to follow his path." A tense silence fell over the chamber. I kept my eyes on the polished surface of the table, feeling the weight of attention bearing down on me. "What exactly are your intentions regarding this Omega?" asked a younger council member, a woman with calculating eyes. Alexander's response was measured, each word deliberate. "Eleanor Gray is not this Omega. She is a true Omega, the firstborn to the Northern Pax in 3 decades." Gasps and murmurs erupted around the table. Elder Lydia paled visibly. "That's impossible. The bloodlines were extinguished." "Not quite," Alexander said. "Helena Gray protected her daughter well, hiding her true nature even from the child herself." He rose from his seat, commanding the room's attention. "I've spent 5 years researching our history, recovering the knowledge my father tried to destroy. The old ways, the true balance of pack structure, with Alpha and Omega as equal counterweights, not top and bottom of a hierarchy." "Folklore," dismissed the battle-scarred man. "Children's tales. Reality," Alexander countered. "A reality your generation helped suppress out of fear or ambition. But the signs are unmistakable to those who know what to look for. The resonance between our wolves. The physical manifestation of the beginning bond during last night's battle." Elder Lydia's sharp intake of breath told me she, at least, understood what he was describing. "You felt the echo pain? Both of you?" I nodded hesitantly, surprised when she addressed me directly. "It cannot be," said another council member, but his denial lacked conviction. "Even if such things existed in the ancient days, what proof do we have that she is this true Omega? She's lived among us for years as nothing special. Because she was deliberately kept ignorant of her nature," Alexander replied, anger threading his voice. "Raised to believe she was worthless, just as you all were conditioned to believe Omegas were the lowest rank instead of the Alpha's necessary balance." The chamber fell silent again, the council members processing this paradigm shift. I gathered my courage and spoke for the first time. "I don't know if what Alpha King Alexander believes about me is true," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "But I do know that our pack, all our packs, are facing extinction if we continue as we have been. The southern wolves grow bolder because they sense our division, our imbalance." I touched my pendant, drawing strength from it. "My mother told me before she died that strength comes from surviving storms. Perhaps this storm is our opportunity to find a new kind of strength." Alexander's eyes met mine, approval warming his amber gaze. The council members studied me with new interest, some thoughtful, some still skeptical. "If what you say is true," Elder Lydia said slowly, addressing Alexander, "then the implications extend far beyond a personal connection. The bond between true Alpha and true Omega has been described in the oldest texts as transformative, not just for the pair, but for the entire pack. Which is precisely why my father sought to eliminate the true Omegas," Alexander confirmed. "A bonded pair creates a pack structure resistant to tyranny, built on balance rather than dominance alone." "And the southern packs?" asked the battle-scarred counselor. "They attacked specifically when they saw you with her. They must know something of this ancient lore as well." "Victor's father was my father's strongest ally," Alexander said grimly. "They shared the same vision of rule through terror. Victor would see the old knowledge suppressed just as fiercely." A new respect dawned in the eyes of some council members as they looked at me, no longer seeing a lowly Omega, but a potentially crucial piece in the struggle for the Northern Pack's survival. Others remained dubious, entrenched in generations of hierarchy. "What would you have us do, sire?" asked Elder Lydia, pragmatic as ever. "Prepare for war while we pursue peace," Alexander replied. Double the border patrols, accelerate training for all able wolves, and send emissaries to the 2 neutral territories with offers of alliance. And her? The battle-scarred man nodded toward me. Alexander's hand came to rest on the back of my chair, not quite touching me but establishing a clear connection. Eleanor will remain under my personal protection while she learns what it means to be a true Omega. The full bond cannot and will not be rushed. It must develop naturally, with consent and understanding from both sides. The council meeting continued for another hour. Focusing on defensive strategies and diplomatic initiatives, I listened carefully, absorbing the complex politics of a world I'd been adjacent to, but never part of. Throughout, Alexander included me with small gestures, explaining references I might not understand, asking for my impressions on matters being discussed. It was clear he was already treating me as a partner, not a possession. When the meeting finally adjourned, most council members departed with formal nods in my direction, a level of acknowledgement I'd never received before. Elder Lydia lingered, approaching us as the chamber emptied. "I knew your mother," she said to me, her voice softer than it had been during the meeting. "Helena was a strong wolf, fiercely protective. Now I understand who she was protecting." Her eyes held mine. "If you are truly what Alexander believes, then you carry a heavy burden, young one. The hopes of the northern packs rest on shoulders that have never known anything but scorn." "I didn't ask for this," I said honestly. "No one worthy of power ever does," she replied, a sad smile touching her lips. "That's precisely what makes them worthy." With a respectful nod to Alexander, she departed, leaving us alone in the council chamber. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of change. I moved from the cramped Omega quarters to a suite adjacent to Alexander's, my few meager possessions looking lost amid the new luxury. Maria became my personal attendant, helping me navigate the bewildering transition from invisible to infamous. "They're calling you the Ghost Queen," she informed me one morning while helping me dress in one of the many new garments that had appeared in my wardrobe, this one a silver-gray dress that complemented my pale blonde hair. "Some with respect, others." She trailed off diplomatically. "Others with resentment," I finished for her. "I know. I can feel it when I walk through the halls." The pack's reaction to my elevation had been mixed. Some, particularly the younger wolves, and those who had themselves experienced the sting of rigid hierarchy, embraced the possibility of change. Others, comfortable with their status or ideologically aligned with the old ways, regarded me with suspicion or outright hostility. I had gone from being beneath notice to being the most scrutinized wolf in the territory overnight. Alexander had begun my education immediately. Hours spent in the ancient archives, studying texts that describe the true nature of pack dynamics. The more I learned, the more I understood how profoundly my father's reign had distorted our society. True Omegas were not the bottom of a pyramid, but a counterbalance to alpha power, empathic, intuitive, capable of sensing emotions and intentions that eluded even the strongest alphas. They could calm aggression with their presence, facilitate healing at an accelerated rate, and forge connections between disparate factions. "Your mother must have been training you subtly, even as she hid your true nature," Alexander observed as I demonstrated an uncanny ability to sense the emotions of wolves in another room, a skill I'd always possessed, but had attributed to hypervigilance, a survival mechanism in a hostile world. "She always told me to trust my instincts," I said, the memories of my mother's quiet guidance taking on new significance. To feel the currents beneath the surface. Alongside my studies came physical training. No longer malnourished and constantly exhausted, my body began to strengthen. A true Omega would never possess an alpha's raw power, but we had our own kind of strength. Endurance, agility, and a remarkable adaptability. Under the guidance of Damon, who had become one of my strongest allies, I learned basic self-defense and how to channel my empathic abilities as a tactical advantage. "You can sense intention before action," he explained during one training session in a private courtyard. "That's an edge most warriors would kill for." Through it all, my relationship with Alexander evolved. We spent hours together each day, sometimes in formal settings with advisors and military strategists, sometimes alone in his private study, discussing history, philosophy, and increasingly, our personal pasts. I learned of his childhood under a tyrannical father, how he'd been shaped by witnessing cruelty disguised as strength. He learned of my years in the shadows, how I'd developed keen observation skills and emotional intelligence as survival mechanisms. The echo pain that had first manifested during the battle returned periodically, moments when one of us would feel what the other experienced, a phantom sensation that signaled the deepening of our connection. Each time it happened, the bond between us strengthened, our wolves recognizing each other across the space between us. What began as a political alliance, a theoretical partnership based on ancient lore, gradually transformed into something more personal. I found myself noticing the way his voice softened when we were alone, how his fingers would occasionally brush mine when passing a book or document, sending electricity through my skin. I caught him watching me when he thought I was absorbed in reading, his amber eyes filled with an emotion that made my heart race. Yet he never pushed, never presumed. The full bond, the complete joining of Alpha and Omega that the ancient texts described with reverence, remained theoretical, a future possibility rather than an immediate expectation. I was grateful for his patience, for the space to grow into my new identity without the pressure of his desire. But desire was there, simmering beneath the surface of our every interaction. I felt it in the air between us, saw it in the way his pupils dilated when I entered a room, sensed it in the careful distance he maintained even as our emotional intimacy deepened. My own response mirrored his, a yearning that grew stronger with each passing day, a pull toward completion that my wolf recognized even as my human mind cautioned patience. 37 days after the southern attack, as autumn deepened toward winter, the fragile peace shattered. I woke before dawn, gasping from a nightmare filled with blood and fire. But it wasn't just a dream. The phantom sensations continued as I sat up in bed, a burning pain across my ribs that wasn't mine. "Alexander," I whispered. Knowing instantly he was in danger, I threw on clothes and ran from my chamber, barefoot and disheveled, following the pull of the partial bond. Guards looked startled as I raced past them, but none tried to stop me. They'd grown accustomed to my unusual status and relationship with their king. I found him in the training yards, surrounded by his elite guard, blood seeping through his shirt. A messenger knelt before him, face grim. "What's happened?" I demanded, rushing to Alexander's side. He turned to me, surprise briefly displacing the pain and anger in his eyes. "You felt it." "Of course I did. You're injured." My hands went to his side automatically, finding the source of the blood. A long gash that was already beginning to heal but still serious enough to cause considerable pain. "Border Patrol ambush," Damon explained, appearing at my side. "Southern assassins crossed the river during the night. The king intercepted them before they reached the fortress. 5 of them," Alexander added grimly, "better trained than the last group. They got closer than they should have." The messenger, a young beta with wide, frightened eyes, spoke up. "Sire, there's more. The Eastern Neutral Territory received a similar attack last night. Their Alpha sends word that they're ready to accept your alliance offer. They believe the Southern Coalition intends to conquer both our territories within the month." This was what we'd feared, a coordinated assault on multiple fronts. The Southern Pax had been gathering allies, building an empire through intimidation and force. If they managed to take the Northern Territories, the continent's balance of power would shift dramatically. "Call the War Council," Alexander ordered, wincing slightly as he straightened. 1 hour. As the messengers and guards dispersed to carry out his commands, I kept my hand on his wound, a tingling warmth spreading from my palm. It was another ability I'd discovered in recent weeks. Not true healing, but an acceleration of the natural process, particularly effective with Alexander due to our developing bond. "You shouldn't have come running out here," he said softly, though there was no real rebuke in his tone. "It's not safe. I felt your pain," I replied simply. I couldn't stay away. His hand covered mine, warm and strong. "The bond is deepening faster than I expected." "Is that a problem?" His eyes met mine, intense and conflicted. "It's complicated. The stronger our connection becomes, the more Victor will want both of us dead. A partial bond makes us vulnerable in ways a full bond wouldn't." It was a conversation we'd been avoiding. The ancient texts were clear. A fully realized bond between true Alpha and true Omega created a synergy that amplified both wolves' abilities. A union greater than the sum of its parts. Such a pair, leading a pack, was formidable beyond ordinary measure, but the bonding process itself, the final step, left both parties temporarily vulnerable, their defenses lowered as their wolves and human sides merged completely. "We should talk about this," I said, "but not here." He nodded, covering his injury with his hand as mine fell away. Tonight, after the War Council. The council meeting was grim. Reports from scouts confirmed what the messenger had told us. The Southern Coalition was mobilizing on a massive scale. Their army would reach our borders within 2 weeks, possibly sooner if they maintained their current pace. The Eastern Neutral Territory's defection to our side provided some additional strength, but the Western Neutrals remained uncommitted, wary of choosing the losing side. "We're outnumbered nearly 2-1, Damon reported, pointing to the map spread across the war room table. "Even with the Eastern Wolves, even if every adult in our territory takes up arms." "Numbers aren't everything," Alexander countered. "We have the advantage of terrain, of fighting on our homeland. And we have something they don't expect." His eyes found mine across the table. The council members followed his gaze, understanding dawning on their faces. Over the past weeks, I had earned if not the respect, then at least the consideration of most. They'd seen how my presence affected morale, how wolves who had been traditionally overlooked felt valued when I spoke to them, how my insights into pack dynamics had already resolved several long-standing internal conflicts. "The Ghost Queen," murmured Elder Lydia, using the nickname that had spread through the pack. "But a partially bonded pair isn't the same as a completed one. The old texts are clear on that, which is why we must consider accelerating the timeline," Alexander said carefully, his eyes still on mine. "The full bonding ritual was traditionally performed during the winter solstice, but given our circumstances, it's too dangerous," objected the battle-scarred counselor. "During the ceremony, both of you would be vulnerable. If the Southern forces timed an attack, if we wait, we may not survive to see the solstice," countered another council member. "The bond could give us the edge we need." I listened to them debate my future, our future, as if it were a military strategy rather than a profound, life-altering union. My fingers found my mother's pendant, seeking its familiar comfort. "Shouldn't this be our decision?" I asked quietly, but the room fell silent at my words. "Alexander's and mine?" Alexander's expression softened as he looked at me. "Of course it is. The council advises, but in this, we decide." The meeting continued, discussing defensive positions, evacuation plans for the vulnerable, supply stockpiles. Throughout, I felt the weight of the decision hanging over us. By the time we adjourned, night had fallen, a heavy snow beginning to dust the mountains visible from the war room windows. Alexander and I walked in silence back to his quarters, both lost in thought. The guards took their positions outside his doors, and for the first time since that fateful night, we were truly alone, without advisors or attendants or the pressure of immediate crisis. "You're afraid," he said as he poured 2 glasses of wine, handing one to me. "Aren't you?" I countered, accepting the drink, but not sipping it yet. "Terrified," he admitted with a small smile, echoing our exchange before the first council meeting, but not of the bond itself. I moved to the fire, needing its warmth. "What then?" "Of failing you, of asking too much, too soon." He joined me by the hearth, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body. "When I found you that night, eating leftovers in an alcove, I had no right to upend your life, to thrust you into danger and politics and war." "You didn't upend my life," I said softly. "You gave me one. A real one where I matter." His eyes, amber in the firelight, searched mine. "You always mattered, Eleanor. The tragedy is that no one, including me, recognized it until now." I set my untouched wine on the mantel, gathering my courage. "Tell me about the bonding. The full version, not what you share with the council." He set his glass beside mine, his expression solemn. "The texts describe it as a joining of souls, wolf and human, alpha and omega. It begins with a ritual hunt, followed by an exchange of blood and vows beneath the moon. The final step is physical union. A faint color touched his cheekbones. It's intimate, sacred. And afterwards, we would be truly mated, able to sense each other's emotions, share strength, even communicate telepathically across distances. Our wolves would be permanently aligned, two halves of a whole. For life, I said, understanding the gravity of such a commitment. For life, he confirmed. There's no severing a true bond once formed. I turned away from him, facing the fire as I processed what this meant. And if I said no, if I wasn't ready, then we continue as we are, he said without hesitation. I told you from the beginning, Eleanor. This must be your choice, freely made. I won't use the war, the danger to our people, as leverage to rush you into something so profound. I believed him. In the weeks I'd known him, truly known him, not just as my distant alpha, Alexander had never once used his power to coerce me, had never treated me as less than his equal. It was that, more than anything, that helped me make my decision. I turned back to face him, reaching for his hand. If we do this, if we complete the bond, it won't just change us. It will change everything. The pack structure, the hierarchy, centuries of tradition. Some traditions deserve to be broken, he said, his fingers intertwining with mine. Especially those built on cruelty and suppression. There will be resistance. Not everyone will accept a true Omega as your equal. Then they will learn. Or they will leave. His voice was firm. The old ways weren't just folklore, Eleanor. They were wiser, more balanced. A pack led by bonded Alpha and Omega pairs thrived in ways we've forgotten. I studied his face, the face that had become so dear to me in such a short time. Behind his strength, I saw vulnerability. The boy who had witnessed his father's atrocities. The young Alpha who had taken on the burden of leadership while still grieving. The man who sought to heal what generations had broken. And I knew my decision was already made. Not for the war, I said softly. Not for political advantage or ancient prophecy. My hand rose to touch his face, my palm against his cheek. For us. Because I choose you, as you've chosen me. The heat in his eyes intensified, his hand coming up to cover mine. Eleanor. Tonight, I said, surprising myself with my certainty. Under this moon, not waiting for some perfect moment that might never come. For a heartbeat, he remained still, searching my face for any sign of doubt. Finding none, he leaned down, his lips meeting mine in our first kiss. It was gentle at first, a question more than a demand, but as I responded, sliding my arms around his neck, it deepened into something primal and consuming. His arms encircled me, pulling me against the solid warmth of his body, as the kiss evolved into an exploration, a promise of what was to come. When we finally parted, both breathing heavily, his forehead rested against mine. There's a clearing in the forest, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Sacred ground where the first alpha pairs completed their bond centuries ago. If we leave now, we can be there by midnight. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We separated reluctantly, each moving with purpose, he to arrange for discreet guards to escort us, I to change into something suitable for the ritual he'd described. Within the hour, we slipped from the fortress, 4 trusted wolves flanking us as we made our way into the ancient forest that bordered the packlands. The night was clear and cold, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. Snow dusted the ground, crunching beneath our boots as we followed a path visible only to wolf eyes. The forest felt alive around us, watchful, as if the spirits of those who had walked this path before were witness to our journey. The clearing, when we reached it, took my breath away. A perfect circle of ancient pines surrounded a space where the snow seemed to glow with an inner light, reflecting the 3/4 moon that hung directly overhead. At the center stood a stone altar, weathered by time, but still bearing the carved symbols of our kind. The wolf, the moon, the eternal cycle. Our escorts remained at the perimeter, turning outward to guard against intrusion. Alexander led me to the altar, his face solemn yet alight with something I'd never seen before. Not just desire or affection, but a profound recognition, as if his soul had been waiting for this moment his entire life. "The ritual has 3 parts," he explained, his voice low. "The hunt, the blood binding, and the mating. Traditionally, we would begin with a chase through the forest, but given the danger—" "We've been hunting each other since the moment we met," I said, understanding flowing between us, circling, watching, learning each other's movements. "The hunt is already complete," he smiled, a flash of white teeth in the moonlight. "Wise Omega." Then we moved to the blood binding. From his pocket, he withdrew a small ceremonial knife, its blade gleaming silver. "A small cut on each palm," he explained. "Then we press them together, mixing our blood while speaking the vows." I nodded, offering my hand without hesitation. The blade was sharp, the pain minimal as he drew it across my palm, a line of crimson welling up against my pale skin. He then cut his own hand, deeper than mine, alpha blood dark in the moonlight. He placed the knife on the altar and took my wounded hand in his. "Repeat after me," he said softly. "By blood and bone, by moon and mind, I bind myself to you. By blood and bone, by moon and mind, I bind myself to you," I echoed, feeling the words resonate through me, ancient and powerful. 2 wolves, 1 path, 2 souls, 1 journey, he continued. 2 wolves, 1 path, 2 souls, 1 journey. Where you go, I follow. Where you fall, I stand. What you love, I protect. As it was in the beginning, as it shall be until the end. I repeated the final vow, tears blurring my vision as I felt something shift within me, my wolf stirring, pressing forward, recognizing her mate across the thin barrier of skin and blood. "Now we seal the bond," Alexander whispered, drawing me closer. "Are you certain, Eleanor? Once done, this cannot be undone." In answer, I reached up with my free hand, pulling his head down to mine. Our lips met as our blood mingled between our pressed palms, and the world around us seemed to fall away. There was only this moment, this man, this ancient magic flowing between us like an electric current. What followed was sacred and private, the culmination of the ritual that had begun with blood and continued with the joining of bodies beneath the watching moon. As we came together on the soft furs that our escorts had discreetly laid beside the altar, I felt the last walls between us crumbling. My wolf merged with his, our souls entangling in a dance as old as our kind. Power surged between us, through us, a circuit completed after decades of interruption. In that moment of perfect unity, I understood what the ancient texts had tried to describe, the indescribable feeling of becoming both more fully yourself and part of something greater. No longer alone, never alone again. 2 wolves, 1 heart. Alpha and Omega, not as hierarchy, but as perfect necessary balance. As we lay together afterward, wrapped in furs and each other's warmth, the first light of dawn began to touch the eastern sky. I could feel Alexander, not just beside me, but within me, his thoughts brushing against mine, his emotions flowing into my awareness like colors I could suddenly perceive. "I love you," I thought, testing this new connection, sending the words directly from my mind to his. His arms tightened around me, his lips pressing against my temple. "And I love you, my queen, my heart, my balance." We returned to the fortress as the sun rose, our escorts forming a protective circle around us. The bond hummed between us, new and strong, transforming us both in ways I was only beginning to understand. I could sense the life force of the forest as we passed through it, could feel the emotions of our guards without looking at their faces. Alexander moved with a new grace. Some of the rigid control he'd always maintained softened by the influx of my empathic nature. We knew, without discussing it, that war still waited on our doorstep. The southern packs would not abandon their plans because of our bonding, might even accelerate them if word reached them. But we faced that future differently now. Not as Alpha and his political ally, but as true mates, a bonded pair with strength beyond what either of us possessed alone. As we approached the fortress gates, the guards snapped to attention, their eyes widening as they sensed the change in us. Word would spread quickly. The Alpha King and his Ghost Queen had completed the ancient ritual, had forged the bond that hadn't been seen in 3 generations. Some would rejoice, others would resist, but none could deny the power that now radiated from us like heat from a flame. "Ready?" Alexander asked, pausing before the gates, his hand firm around mine. I touched my mother's pendant with my free hand, thinking of her sacrifice, her protection, her preparation for this moment she would never see. "Ready," I affirmed. Together we stepped forward into a new day, a new era for our packs. The last Omega had found her Alpha, and nothing would ever be the same again.